Welcome back to our continued coverage of the Fantasy Sports Trade Association here in New York City. Tony Sincata, Nana DeFino, Dick Turnbull. What's going on, man?
Fernando.
Excellent draft.
What are you doing? Oh, the draft, man, last night, jeez. Yeah.
And let me, before we get into XML, I want to, and actually you had a very cool story you were talking about before we came back, about how it started. You registered like one of the first fantasy sports websites back in '89.
Well, it wasn't a website back then, but
it was name, right?
It was the name, and it registered in the name Fantasy Sports Services, and I was trying to come up with a name for the company because it was I had games based upon real players, real information, and but it was all about drafting and picking players, and we actually did IDP back then. Wow. You drafted 28 players, so 2 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, 4 receivers, and it was funny going back through the data. And this is what for us in our league this year, right, is every year for the first 15 years, a top guy in the top 10 at the end of the year was not drafted. And we went 16 teams deep. So you had guys from Majowski back in the Magic Man back in like 1989, guys like that. And it's still true with Arian Foster a couple of years ago, guys like that. Every year there's always a guy, so that first week of drop ads is always huge.
We talk about the growth in the fantasy sports industry. The one thing I'm baffled by, and we do this on Sunday mornings on our TV show on the Fantasy Sports Network, we have one IDP segment. Why hasn't IDP grown in fantasy sports? You get the total inclusion of all the players, plus that Thursday night game when it's Jacksonville versus Tennessee. This way I have a player in the game. Unless you're Nando DeFino, you always have a Jaguar.
Yeah, that's how I roll, yeah.
And it is interesting because, back then, you would have to decide, do you want that cornerback, do you want that safety, do you want the guy who's going to make the tackles or to go for the interceptions and guys like that. And again, every year the landscape changed a little bit because all of a sudden how the receiving game changed, how the tight ends changed within the game. It changed everything, but you're so right. It included every player except for the offensive line. That was basically it.
They named Ballers. I don't know if you know the Ballers, the HBO show. Rob Corddry's character was he got the job because he hooked the rock up and told the guys who were in charge that he was on his fantasy team.
Right.
It's like, you're a defenseman. I don't play. They think I played an IDP league. You call it out. You got to it came this far. Like a show on HBO with The Rock, they're calling out IDP leagues on TV.
But it is amazing, and it's also we also used to have it where you pick your starting lineup, or have an automatically take your best, and we're obviously in the starting lineup. But everybody used to always say, automatically take your best. There's no coaching decisions on it. And what was interesting, all of a sudden, any trade had real value because it was who the other guy you were getting, and you can never have deadwood on your team. Like last night, why I drafted Luck early, because I had Kaepernick and Wilson last year, and I hated having to make that friggin' decision every week, and it was always the wrong guy. So I said, give me Luck. I don't want to have to make that decision and everything else. But all of a sudden, in an automatically take your best, Kaepernick and Wilson are just as important, and every player on your roster is just as important because, you have that week where Fitzpatrick actually outscores Romo.
And someone else is going to make that choice for you when it's all said and done.
Right. So
I want to bring it back. When you were talking about the waiver wire and how important the waiver wire is in the first week, a strategy that I've seen pop up lately, a couple of years, do poorly in week 1 so you have the #1 waiver priority when that comes around.
Right.
Is that something you would advocate, or no, that's insane, you want to win every week?
No, you definitely want to win every week, but I like in ours, we have a dollar value. Yeah. You have to pick it up, so you have to make that decision. Do I want to pick up that guy? You can go back in years and see that guy who gets that one start, who then flounders after that, and it's based upon decisions. Do I want to spend my $100 budget on making sure I pick up that guy? And I like that better than automatically, just because I finished 16th that first week. Because 8 teams are going to finish, or 7 teams are going to finish 0-1.
Right.
And it's just based on that 2 points or 3 points.
Yeah, what's crazy to me is I understand the strategy. If you don't do well, you get that first waiver wire pick, and someone always either by injury or someone that missed a draft, you grab that. But that kind of sentiment bothers me. It's like quitting your job so you can collect unemployment.
Right.
I'm not saying I like it. I'm just saying we get calls on the show. I should lose.
It's a strategy.
But if you have numbers that bear out, like that first week of waiver wire pickups, there's a guy who's going to finish in the top 15
Absolutely.
like every year.
And remember, the fact is in all these leagues, we're going to be, 6 of the teams are going to make the playoffs. So I only have to end up in the top 6, and chances are I'm going to lose a game anyway. Le'Veon Bell, if you have him, he's going to be missing the first 2 weeks. So why not,
right?
Make that move. So
I like it.
It's a strategy. Well, this is the fun thing is everybody has a different strategy, right? And that's the whole idea behind it.
And no one's figured it out yet. That's the best. But no, like the Chris Vaccaros of the world, the Lindy Hinklemans of the world, but
Well, you have, like, I mean, there's no doubt about it. You have your own strategy, and there are winning strategies to at least put you in the top, you know, several spots. But there's no guaranteed winning strategy. If there was, we'd all be in Vegas or doing whatever. You know,
right, we'd not be here.
Right, exactly. You know?
You know, it's amazing in fantasy sports, I think, with the daily fantasy industry grown, one of the things that's brought into the fanfare is these live events they have. And at XML Team Solutions, one of the things you offer are live events. And I think people need to take part in as many of these possible, because these are great things. These are things you remember the rest of your life.
Well, it is true, and it's so funny because when we started, there wasn't the internet, right? So we would actually give people cheat sheets and everything like that back in 89, 90, 91, whatever. But I would literally have to set it up where I would go and meet the 14 people that were drafting and run the draft in person with them.
Oh, man.
And they wouldn't come as a league because they wouldn't know, well, what's a fantasy league? What's whatever, right? And so you'd have to meet them and introduce them. Hey, Tony, here's Fernando, you know, whatever. And they're going, okay, who are you? And all different ages. So we'd run the draft live. And so then I would be like, okay, sitting there like, okay, I got to do this for like 30, 40 leagues. You know, spend 4 hours a night in a bar or an afternoon in a bar.
And so then it could be worse.
Yeah, exactly. So then it would be coming up with ideas to talk about, you know, talking about the players, talking about as they're drafting, and to keep the camaraderie going, because we all now in our leagues know each other, right?
Right.
So part of the camaraderie is getting together, you know, ripping, you know, Tony for his pick or whatever. You know, how could you pick, you know, why were you picking Melvin Gordon now? You know, that type of thing. But back then, if you go to a draft like ours, you may not know everybody in your league. So how do we connect the dots? How do we have the familiarity between them? And that's what we do with some of our live events, is what we do events for, you know, some of the teams, some of the organizations, some of their sponsors, so that they can now connect the dots between each other at the tables. And it's up to me to make sure I make them all feel comfortable, because they don't know the guy beside them.
Right. It's tough.
They'll have their little own war table, so they know everybody at their own table, but they don't know anybody at the next table. So.
Tigger, before we let you go, I detect a hint of a Canadian accent.
I don't know where you get that. Out or out?
Fantasy Sports Network, very big up in Canada. We're on Bell 5 and all this. Hey,
I know.
You want to say hey to you?
I know Mark. I know Chad. I know all those guys up there. I've known them for years. So they're great guys. It's a great network, and you know, it's taken off. It's good to see.
Yeah. Hey, look, we got headsets. We've made it. Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
Tigger Turnbull, man. Thanks for swinging by. Always a pleasure talking to one of the guys there.
Now we'll let the schedule dictate.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. We're the B League together.
I'm going down the first week so I can get the top pick.
We're gonna have dueling strategies, baby.
Exactly.
I'm doing it because my team stinks.
There you go.
Tigger Turnbull here at the FSTA Summer Conference in New York City. We're gonna take a quick break. We'll be back with more on the Fantasy Sports Network.